fine. Scotland was one of the sort of earliest places that we played. We in 1990 we used to do gigs at Pure. Do you remember a legendary club called Pure in Edinburgh?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yes, I'm from Edinburgh, but I think it was a bit before my time. But I know it.
Yeah, it looks like it probably was, but it was. Yeah, in my time it was fantastic, and they used to get us up there to play live. And we ended up working with the guys who ran it. Rock, one of the main guys, ended up being our tour manager, and the DJs from Pure used to sort of come on the road with us sometimes. And but we also played in Aberdeen at Fever as well, which is another sort of early rave club. And then on top of that, the first sort of big band that took us under their wing and had us be their like support band and things like that was the Chime. And so they all, a lot of them came from Aberdeen as well. We ended up sort of working with a lot of their crew for most of the 90s, and their kind of sound man Mickey Mann ended up being our sound man and sort of co-producer as well. So Scotland's got a big big part in Orbital, especially in the 90s. We always, I think one of my favorite gigs on a sort of tour of the UK is always used to be the Barrowlands as well in Glasgow, which is a great one. That and Brixton Academy were two of my favorite venues.
Brilliant. And you mentioned some of those, the early days on the tour on tour, and kind of how was it pretty mental? Like how did it feel going on tour the first couple of times, and kind of thinking to yourself, this is amazing what you're doing, and do you know what I mean? Well, how was that experience the first couple of times?
It was quite. Do you know what? Back then, it kind of felt quite pioneering in a way. Yeah. Although you didn't really think of it, well, sort of. You felt more like here we are doing our thing when nobody really thinks we can or should be. Do you know what I mean? There was quite a sort of attitude from the sort of rock and roll fraternity that dance music or electronic music isn't proper. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like treated like a sort of second-class citizen. And we did our first sort of proper tour with the Megadog and loads of other sort of artists. I think around '93, the Megadog MIDI Circus tour, and that was the first, as far as we could tell, the first sort of dance music, electronic kind of tour in rock and roll venues around the country. So it hadn't really been done before, and we were trying to get them to stay open till 2 most nights, so that it was sort of treated a bit like a nightclub and a bit like a sort of rock gig and that kind of thing. And it was great because there's no kind of hierarchy. We'd sort of have a rolling sort of headline slot. We'd revolve as to who played first, last, and in the middle. It was brilliant. It was a really good time. Really interesting, kind of making up, the rules for, on the template of rock and roll, but sort of imprinting it with the kind of whole rave generation sort of ideals. It was great.
Yeah, and were you doing sort of the live sets and DJing at the same, doing a mixture? Was it, were you
always live? I've done DJing, but only for fun. Really, DJing is not what it's not. Yeah, we've done a bit of DJing here and there when someone really asks us to do it. Do you know what I mean? So go on, come and DJ. Occasionally we've done it, but it's all about sort of playing live music, really. That's the Orbital thing.
Yeah, and how did you what was the kind of process behind planning your live set, and how do you plan a live set, and what's the process behind it, and was it what was your thinking when you first came up with it, and how was this going to work? And
well, essentially it was pick up the studio that we had in our mum and dad's kind of living room and put it on stage and then jam with it. Do you know what I mean? That was literally it. So you sort of, I don't play keyboards live, like this, because that's not the kind of music I make. It's a lot of sequence-based music. So what the Orbital kind of thing is what I think is, interestingly, what I thought I was doing was taking the format of Tangerine Dream and just sort of adapting that, which I know they were quite jammy about the way they went about it, playing with sequences and things like that. So I just kind of thought that seemed like a really good way to go when you don't hand play stuff, when it's kind of electronic and sequence based. So you take everything with you, get everything prepared, make sure you know where all the different songs and sequences are within your equipment, and then have a set list. This is what I think I want to play, and then just jam the tracks. And that's still how we do it now. That's exactly how it operates. I have all the parts ready to go and just start playing the songs, and and let them go where they want, which is obviously, it's quite freeing, because if you do a gig that, if you've got a set that's an hour and 45 roughly, and that tends to be what you do.
Yeah.
If someone says you've got an hour and 15, you can kind of go, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to drop some tracks, or am I going to just play them all quickly?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of nice to have that flexibility, and kind of you play through some quickly, stretch out some, go, I'm not going to play that last track. I've run out of time. But it doesn't matter, because it means you've had a good time getting up to that point,
Yeah, for sure. And how do you and Phil sort of work together as a pair, and like what are your different roles in the live set, and how is it working as a pair?
I do the arranging. I'm the writer of the band, so I sort of write most of the music, and I do the arranging. And then live, Phil's got a couple of synths on his side, and that he fiddles with. So they're his. I've got my synths on my side that I fiddle with. And there's we've got like sort of a mixer in between us, kind of thing. So I leave that for Phil to do the mixing while I'm doing the arranging. Do you know what I mean? And that tends to work well. We do, I jump in and do a bit of mixing as well if I know what I'm about to do, and I might grab something. But generally speaking, that's the kind of division of labor.
Yeah, and over lockdown as well, obviously, there's been no gigs for a while. How have you been sort of keeping busy? Have you've been working on new music? Is that correct?
Yeah.
And sort of how's that all come about? Is this lockdown giving you a chance to kind of concentrate more on the production side? If there's no gigs going on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I got through loads of stuff. I kind of did a couple of albums that pretty much polished off an Orbital album. And did another album with a mate of mine, Murray Lachlan Young, the poet. We did a sort of diary of the whole sort of first lockdown, the virus diaries, which
I've seen that.
Yeah. So I did that, finished off an Orbital album, and then also did some sort of scoring work, again for some stuff that Murray was doing, just for fun and to keep my hand in, just to keep creative. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I had a lot of stuff going on. Because I like to, it's what I do, it's what I enjoy, writing music. So I just kept myself busy.
Yeah, and we always like to sort of stuff we do is producers kind of watch our stuff, and we kind of always ask people that we get on, like, kind of what's your process of making a track. Some people will start with a sample, or start with the drums or the bass or whatever. I mean, what do you have a set process, or?
No, not really. It's kind of nowadays, the sort of the more I do music, the more it kind of just comes to me. Like I sometimes I'll just fiddle about. You're doing something else, then you start playing something. You go, oh, and you go off on a tangent. Normally, from a riff, or that could be anything. Could be a drum beat, could be a riff, could be a sample. But generally speaking, I'll sit down with a sort of an idea. And it might be a technical idea. Oh, I want to see what I can do with this synthesizer, and then that'll spawn some music.
Yeah.
But there's generally no fixed path, really, for the way I go about stuff. But generally, I'll have an idea nowadays before I sit down.
Yeah, and going back, we always like to ask some of our guests we get on is about how you market your music, and how that's kind of evolved from, and how you get your music out there from the 90s, and see even stuff like, your image as well, and the music videos, and, the sort of trippy nature. Is that something you're heavily involved in? And is that kind of something that you had the vision for Orbital when you started putting out the tracks, and how it was kind of presented to the world?
Generally, yeah. I mean, generally, what we did, we had no fixed plan to start with. It's just an expression of what you like and what you enjoy. Do you know what I mean? But over time, that becomes sort of apparent that, for example, I have an obsession with time. Do you know what I mean? And that always pops up. It always pops up in stuff that I do. Sort of the strangeness of time. I mean, the music's a time-based medium, isn't it? You can't have a 3-minute song without 3 minutes time to listen to it, and I find that kind of interesting. But it's kind of, you tend to sort of link up with people. It's okay, there's a guy called Luke Losey who's sort of been doing our video work on and off for years. And so he, me and him, we're often sort of, texting about sci-fi and old sort of 70s kind of children's horror stuff and that kind of thing. We have the same kind of interests and that kind of thing. So if I ask him to do a video, I know he's just going to do something along the lines of where my head's at, but we'll discuss it first, or I'll tell him I've got an idea, I want something like this. Do you know what I mean? And it sort of goes from there. And I find sort of just trying to keep that like a small family of creatives that you work with is a good way of going about that. Sometimes, new people come in, you have an idea, or someone else has an idea, and you might just, it clicks with them, and you go, oh yeah, okay, let's try that. And someone else, is enfolded into the family, if you like. But it's the whole kind of sort of, I don't know what it is. There's a bit, I can see bits of everything from my past. I can see all the sci-fi that I used to love. I can see the sort of anarcho-punk of sort of Crass and Flux of Pink Indians in there. I can see the sort of humor of Monty Python and Douglas Adams as well. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, it's all in there,
So will you translate that to sort of, when you're playing a set, try and sort of coordinate the lights to that sci-fi kind of?
When we, like Luke, who I was talking about earlier, he's kind of like our sort of visual director for the live show, because he started off as our first sort of ever lighting engineer. And that's the first time I remember playing with him in America. And every time it sort of bring the guitars in Satan, all the strobe lights would go off, and I thought, that's good. What a great idea, brilliant. And I remember saying to him, so you're doing that every time I do that? And he went, yeah, of course I am. What do you think? What do you think this is? And it's like, oh, okay, that's how it works then. Brilliant. And we've kind of gone on, but we always kind of tried to make it more like a show, so that it feels like a sort of, not a theatre show exactly, but not just a sort of bludgeoning rave of constant sort of lights, so that it's got highs and lows. And that's kind of how I think of the set when I'm arranging the set. I don't think of it as a set of individual tracks. I think of it as one piece, where so which track fits here to make this flow onto where I want it to go. Do you know what I mean? It's definitely a flow. So all the tracks are like waves in one continuous sort of ocean of performance. And the video and lights, work like that as well.
Correlates together. So going back, a question I wanted to ask you is, so what was your first radio play? And the reason I asked that is because my dad's a big John Peel fan, and obviously he was playing a lot of your stuff back then. So I mean, what's your kind of first memory of that first radio play that you
I do remember it very much. So so it was Jazzy M playing it on the Jacking Zone, which was one of the sort of Southeast's best pirate radio, house music pirate radio station. And he used, he was kind of an evangelist for house music. We used to play quite sort of tough stuff back then, and acid house and things like that. And from Sevenoaks, you couldn't hear it. You had to go over the hill just into the edge of London to sort of be able to pick it up. And we used to often sort of drive and sit in a lay-by on a dual carriageway, just sort of to listen to the Jacking Zone. And then my mate worked with someone who was also a DJ on the same station, and he gave Jazzy M a tape of a couple of sort of house music demos that I'd done. And Jazzy M played them, and he went mental over it, just like how it's just saying how brilliant it was, and how this bloke don't even have a band name. It's just this bloke called Paul from Kent. And so saying, you'll hear more from him soon. And my mates recorded the show for me. I was working in my mum and dad's pub, and I got back from the pub, and then there was a knock on the door really late. It's like, who's this? And it was my mate said, oh, Craig, you got to listen to this tape. And they played it, with Jazzy M, playing my, honestly, I thought I'd hit the big time. All I'd done is actually been played on a pirate radio station in the southeast of England. But, to me, it was like I'd hit the big time. I was so chuffed.
I mean, it's such a difference towards now. I mean, you know, getting your music out there when you were starting. I mean, was it a case of, you know, how did you get out there? Was it a case of going around record stores and giving you know, tracks to people, trying to get on plays on radio? And is that how it kind of?
Well, it was that what happened is I gave Chime as a demo to Jazzy M, who was so, you know, because I used to go and see him a lot after he played that. We kind of became friends, and he used to kind of mentor me and give me armfuls of house music and say, right, go and listen to this, like, you know, take some influence from that. And he used to give it to me because I didn't have any money, which was brilliant. But I played him Chime, and he just went crazy in his shop, just saying, right, that's it. I'm starting a label. I'm putting this out. We're gonna do it. And by the time he'd made like a couple of thousand, we had 6 record companies sort of trying to license it. And John Peel had played it as well. I mean, I couldn't believe it when, you know, to hear John Peel saying, oh, and that's a Orbital, Chime. And it's just like, you know, it was amazing.
Mental.
You know, it's brilliant. He was such a supporter of us, John Peel. He was brilliant, right? You know, right till the end. He'd always supported us and played our tracks. He was great. So, you know, I think that the fact is that Jazzy M was running a record shop, the Vinyl Zone on Fulham Road, you know, giving it to, you know, selling to DJs. That's how the track got out there. But he also used to give, because it was white labels, you know, the sort of white van men, the guys that were distribution van guys would take a few off of him and take them up north and that kind of thing. And so they, you know, these guys were spreading it around sort of under the counter, as white labels were back then. So, you know, we ended up in all the, you know, decent record shops all over the country, and Chime became quite a big thing, sort of, you know, in the northern part of England, which is probably why we ended up, you know, playing in places like, you know, Aberdeen and Edinburgh early on.
So did those, after that, how long after till sort of Chime came out and the bookings started to sort of roll in? And you know, you said you were working at your in a pub. Like, when did you realize, right, I can quit this and do this full time? You know.
Well, actually, I was the pub was earlier. I was working in a pizza restaurant, and that I quit that the day up that we got Top of the Pops. When we had to go and do Top of the Pops, I went into and checked the rota, and they had me down for working on Wednesday, and I was like, oh, I've got to do Top of the Pops. And, you know, it was, you know, sacrilege. You couldn't change the rota once it was written. But I said to sort of Karen, the manager, I said, oh, I can't come in on Wednesday. And she said, you can't change the rota. And I said, I've got to go and do Top of the Pops. And she just kind of screamed and grabbed hold of my face and just went, you know, and just went, oh my God, of course you got to, you know, just go and do it. We'll sort something out. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that was it. You know, I said to her, you know, I'm probably not coming back. And she just said, that's all right. But if ever it doesn't work out, you'll always have a job here if you need it. You know, it's so kind. And but I didn't go back, you know, only to buy pizza.
Yeah. But what was that going into Top of the Pops? I mean, what were you feeling? Were you nervous? And
oh, it's brilliant. It was so much fun. It was kind of, you know, because they won't let you play live. You have to mime, and that's one of our great kind of.
Oh, they didn't let you play live?
No, but they don't let anyone play live. It was all mime. Top of the Pops is always mimed. There's only a couple of people who've ever insisted that they play live, and that's only when they're big enough to insist, because when Top of the Pops just can't deal with not having them, you know.
Yeah.
But essentially, if you're, you know, doing your first single, you're never going to get away with that. So that's why, you know, if you look at our Top of the Pops performance, it's very lackluster, and because we kind of refuse to mime. So we're just standing there and fiddling with the on and off switches and the plug sockets and that kind of thing, and just kind of standing there looking like fish out of water. You know, it's ridiculous. We had no idea about putting on a show, because that's not what we do. It's like being a craftsman when we're on stage. It's about kind of manipulating all this technology and giving something to the audience and watching them and getting feedback and then putting it back out again. You know, it's a two-way street, because it is sort of improv. So it has to be a two-way street. So Top of the Pops wasn't really our best position, but it was absolutely brilliant fun. It was great.
And do you think that kind of really kind of, you know, you're obviously you know, getting well known in the sort of the house scene, and do you think that kind of elevated your profile even further?
I think it did, but I think in some ways there's an element of a lot of DJs wouldn't play us after we'd been on Top of the Pops. It's like, oh, that's too commercial now. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. There's always been that sort of element in dance music for sure. People are always looking for the next big thing or something rare. That's the nature of DJing, isn't it? You're trying to play people something they haven't heard. But no, it definitely did us well. As did signing with Pete Tong and being on London Records and all of that. That was brilliant. Because they treated us like a proper band rather than just someone who puts out a load of 12 inches, and that was where we wanted to be. We sort of aligned ourselves more with sort of Cabaret Voltaire or Pink Floyd or something like that than the dance music that had come before.
And sort of coming back into the now, how would you say, well, obviously now there's a lot more streaming platforms, it's changed in terms of getting your music out. Like what are there advantages and the challenges for that? Is it more of a crowded space, and kind of what are your views on that and how it's kind of evolved?
Well, I think the whole of the world of entertainment has evolved in a massive way. Do you know what I mean? From when I started, you had very limited sort of video games, 4 channels on the television, and a video recorder if you were lucky. Do you know what I mean? Now we've got unlimited television, we've got the history of rock and roll and recorded music in a device that big. Anything you want to listen to, I can just dial it up on Spotify or Apple Music. And we've got video games coming out of our ears. I don't think people kind of consume their entertainment the same way they did 30 years ago. It's a different thing. Like you say, it's a crowded marketplace, as it is for television and video games. So it's definitely a lot harder to be heard because you're sort of shouting in a sea of much more stuff. So on the one hand, hey, there's more diversity in music and there's more stuff you can go and find, but you've got to know where to look. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing. There's still a few issues with the way streaming works at the minute. The old-fashioned, the way record deals are structured means that artists aren't getting enough from streaming. So that needs to change, but record companies are reluctant to change. So artists are stuck with these gatekeepers between them and Spotify that they have to deal with. But Spotify and Apple Music, they could pay a little bit more as well, or they could change the way they stream, because at the moment loads of sort of revenue that goes into their coffers just gets doled out to the people who earn the most, where instead of it should be one play, that play gets chalked up to that artist. You'd think it was like that, but it isn't. It should be like a jukebox. Do you know what I mean? Although they didn't work like that either, but you know what I mean? It's like, if Orbital get 10,000 plays, we should get 10,000 times whatever a stream is worth. And record companies shouldn't take 70% of it, but currently they do in major deals. So, if you're Ed Sheeran and Dua Lipa and people like that, you are going to earn some money. But for the kind of what I call the middle classes of music, the bands that John Peel used to play, for example, all of those bands that used to do well, like Cabaret Voltaire and people like that, is there a place for people like that anymore? Do you know what I mean? The interesting stuff, the indie stuff, is definitely a harder thing to do. It has to be about live at the moment. I think all of this will change. You've got people like the Ivors Academy sort of working to, campaign and change all of that. And I think it will over time, but I'm not sure when.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And Bandcamp's quite a good one that's come out that, it's good for sort of, I've released a couple of things on Bandcamp and people can obviously pay you directly, which is quite good.
That's a really good, that's a good model, isn't it? Because it's direct to the artist and there's no record company in between. That's the kind of thing. Why do we need record companies anymore? Do you know what I mean? It's like, well, you do if you want someone to invest. That's the difference. But then that comes with a price. So if you want them to invest in advertising and paying for your music videos, then that's what you have to do. You have to give them more of the cut. This is how it works,
Yeah, exactly. And sort of your new music that you've been working on, so sort of how would you say your sound has it evolved over the years, or would you say how would you sort of categorize it? Are you kind of always looking for the next thing, or?
No, I think there's two aspects to this. It's funny because I was having a pub debate with a friend of mine who thought I was talking a load of crap, but I kind of think of it in two ways. There's kind of like the way I write music, which is developing slowly over time as I hone my skills and my listening, tastes. As I learn different things about actually composition and rhythm, I think that's how the music, the writing, the core, the actual notes change. I think then I think there's the stylistically, which is a fashion thing, which is something akin to, if you like, the musical core of me is the naked person, and style is the clothes that you put on. And over the years, I've worn many different clothes, but it's like, you hear sort of dubstep or jungle, or a different, the sort of acid house or whatever. Or currently I listen to a lot of folk music, so you hear that, and all of a sudden these things take an influence on the style of your music. Do you know what I mean? I think this is where my friend was saying I was talking crap, in that he was saying he thinks it's all part of the same thing, and maybe it is. Maybe the style and the sort of content are intrinsically joined, but I find stylistically, I do lots of different things, but I do feel like the core of how I write music, the take on melancholy, the sort of chords that I like, the descending notes that I seem to always prefer. That's a much more slower, glacial paced change, I think. That's more about kind of the real sort of deep rooted part of it. The style just comes and goes, and that's great fun. It's brilliant dressing up in other people's clothes. Do you know what I mean? You hear a different kind of style and think, oh, I want to do something like that. Yeah, that's how this all sort of started for me anyway, just sort of hearing house music. And I'd been making sort of electro and more industrial funk, and then I heard house music and thought, that's like high energy and electro mixed together. Nice, I'm going to try some of that. And you just kind of try it on for size and see what happens, and then you add your own spin and off you go.
And what were some of those early influences that you were listening to when you first sort of came across house?
What was I? What?
Yeah, what yeah, some of the influences or the early people you're listening to.
It's one of those things. I don't know the names of half of the people, but I remember the first track that really piqued my interest in house music was House Nation. That was a big one. So things like Nitro Deluxe, Todd Terry, Black Riot. Those were the big tracks for me. Royal House, again, another Todd Terry, what else was it? Yeah, what else was it? 808 State, New Build. That was a good album. A guy called Gerald, Voodoo Ray. But then I kind of mentally sort of mixed all of that stuff in with the other stuff that I was listening to, like sort of the Severed Heads, Australian electronic band, sort of pre-house music, and Front 242, kind of industrial dance music from Belgium, which had a big influence on New Beat and that kind of thing. As soon as I heard New Beat, I thought, oh God, yeah, okay, I can hear that Front 242 kind of industrial influence in this.
Brilliant. And then, so what's to wrap up? What's kind of a day in the life for you then? Are you in the studio most days, or like how do you structure your day, and kind of what advice do you have for producers out there? And
well, it depends on who you are. I'm a routines kind of person. I like a routine. I thrive on a routine. And so I tend to sort of get up in the morning, do all my bits and pieces that I, for myself, sort of a bit of running. I've got into running during the lockdown, like lots of people.
Yeah, same actually.
It's brilliant. And I can't do without it now. So I kind of get up, do some running for about 45 minutes, come home, have breakfast, basically do any little jobs around the house that have to be done, and then come to work. I tend to get to work about 10:30, and then I leave around 5. And I do that every day, unless there's a reason not to. Do you know what I mean? Or I want to take a day. I've got the joy of being able to take a day off if I want to go and do something. I go to London with my wife or whatever. But generally speaking, I will work 5 days a week. Used to be 9 to 5, but I've let myself off the hook because of the running. So it's now more like 10 to 5. But just work faster. That's what I do. I think I think that for me, the repetition, sort of working when you know, might not be inspired. You know, lots of people say, "Oh, I'm not inspired. I can't do it." It's like, of course you can. You can do anything. You know, you could work on some sounds. You could work on some beats. You could do some mixing. You could tidy your studio. There's loads of stuff you can do.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You could, you know, read the manual for a change, that kind of thing. You know, just do anything, but you will get, you know, inspiration. What is it they say? Inspiration is for amateurs.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's like if you're sort of professional, you just get on with it. You've got to get on with it.
Yeah.
You know, we're doing a TV score at the minute, and I can't just go home because I'm not inspired. I've got to do it. I've got to do it. You've got to get it done.
Yeah.
And I like that though. I like that being forced into doing stuff. That gets you creative juices flowing in of itself, you know.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I would say don't get caught up with the technology either.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you
can do anything.
All the gear and the idea, you know.
Yeah. No, it's exactly. That's exactly right. And I find with too much stuff, you know, I get bogged down when the lockdown happened, and I just rushed down here, grabbed a few of my sort of desert island synths, set them up at home.
Yeah.
And actually, that was really freeing because I only had 3 or 4 bits of kit and a laptop, and it was like, great. Oh, I've got to get this out of these things, and all of a sudden, all the creative juices flow because you've got to think it through. It's brilliant. But definitely less is more.
So yeah, obviously on the 25th, hopefully we'll see you there and grab you for a wee chat because we'll be there doing some media stuff.
Oh, nice.
Well.
Yeah.
And what else you got coming up?
Got loads of stuff coming up now. We've got the postponed Orbital 30 album that got postponed for various reasons, and, you know, changing record label and lockdown. But that's about to start kicking off in about a month. We're going to start releasing the first sort of remixes. That's mostly an album of remixes, a few sort of re-recordings of old favorites that we play live, you know, just to mark this is what they sound like now from 30 years on. We've been playing them for 30 years. This is how they've evolved, you know, from all this improvisation and things. Which is, you know, kind of interesting. You know, I was listening to them the other day and it's like, yeah, okay, this is good. It's quite different. Sounds quite different. So hopefully people will enjoy that. There's a new track to start it all off, which sort of marks the transition of time. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like a bit of a ravey number, but it samples a World in Action documentary that I was on myself when I got beaten up by the police at a rave in Sevenoaks in 1989.
Oof.
I mean, so it's kind of like that seemed like a fitting start to the 30 years of Orbital. You know, this is where we started. Let's see where we end up. And then after that, as soon as that album's out in kind of, I think, April next year, we're going to feed a bunch of remixes every month up until then. And when that's out, we're going to start feeding singles from the new album. We've got an actual proper new Orbital album coming out, you know, October next year. So it's going to be you know, you're going to get bored of us. We're going to have records coming out every month.
Brilliant. No, that's what we want to see in here. But no, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for your time, Paul, and we'll see you on the 25th.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Can't wait. First proper gig.
I know. Here we go. Top man. Cheers.
Nice one. Cheers. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.